Hello, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to our panel. Today we will make a presentation about the food waste management at the cafeteria of Polytechnic Sultan Idrisha. For problem statement, as we can see there, they have production of leachate at the disposal bin area. The leachate may come from the composting process of bacteria from food waste in the bin, and the leachate may lead to the bad odor to the surrounding and affect the soil. Next, as we can see, they have an increasing of food waste generation at the campus cafeteria. Students have made initial data that collect from the food waste that have been collected at the peak hour at the cafeteria and detect the increasing data of food waste day by day. After that, the students have detect lots of cats and flies are roaming at the cafeteria. It's may caused by the food waste at the food waste disposal area. For the initial data, students have made initial data for the study, which is students make a questionnaire to the respondent who were in Polytechnic Sultan Idrisha, and the questionnaire contain the question about the data that important in the study. From the data that have been collected, it will make the further study become easier. For our scope of study, the process carried out include waste generation, storage method, and delivery of waste to the food waste disposal area. This study focused on the customer and food vendors in the cafeteria of Polytechnic Sultan Idrisha. The method of implementation carried out was online due to the constraints of pandemic COVID-19.
For first objective, to determine the level of awareness among consumers at the campus Polytechnic Sultan Idrisha. Second, determine whether client aware of the impact of uncontrolled in food waste. The third, to design a food waste management system for the cafeteria. And lastly, as an innovative idea, to determine the knowledge of food waste. The method we are used in this project, the first is blast our questionnaire. Second, create video and poster, and lastly, create website and campaign.
This is our sticker. We put the banner at the cafeteria. This is our website link.
For questionnaire, we are used reference from Craig G. and Morgan. We blessed to 250 respondents from students in Sultan Idrisha Polytechnic. We have 5 sections. First is general. Second, section A, which is awareness of food impact. Section B is impact and control of design food waste. And 4, section C, design a system of food waste. And lastly, section D, innovation of food waste.
So, for the target for student on food waste management at Cafeteria Polytechnic Sultan Idrisha is from among the student and the civil engineering department, such as diploma civil engineering, diploma in environmental engineering, and diploma in architecture from semester 1 to semester 5 for this questionnaire. So, the target of the study questionnaire is 250 respondents required to be analysed. In addition, the main purpose of targeting the student under department that student know more about the process and also impact on food waste because it's part of their subject.
Based on the graph on gender, 154 respondents are female is highest. Next, 106 are respondents from male is the lowest. This difference shows 15.2% from the highest and lowest. Based on the graph, age respondents from age of 20 years are the highest. Next, respondents age 23 and 25 and above are the lowest. So the difference between the highest and lowest is 41.6%. Based on the graph semester, the highest respondent is from semester 5. The lowest respondent is from semester 4. So the difference shows that the respondent from semester 5 is the highest than semester 4. The difference 36.8%. From the graph CGPA and HPM, the highest respondent is from CGPA 3.5 to 4.0. Besides that, the CGPA of 2.5 and below were the lowest. The difference between highest and lowest is 38.8%. From the graph family income, the highest respondent is from B40 family income. Alright, next respondent from T20 is the lowest. So the difference between the highest and the lowest is 70.4%. For objective number 1, level of customers' wisdom on food waste management knowledge. From the Q1, the highest respondent is no, and the next respondents who are certainly do not know were the lowest. The difference between the highest and the lowest is 65.6%. From the question 2, the highest numbers of respondents has responded agree. Next, respondents who respond to disagree were the lowest. The difference between the highest and the lowest is 44%. From question 4, the highest numbers of respondents has responded no. Next, the respondent who respond to less known is the lowest. The difference between the highest and lowest is 64.8%. Alright, from the question 8, the highest numbers of respondents has strongly agree. Next, the respondent who less agree and above is the lowest. The difference between the highest and the lowest is 46%. For optional, from the question number 2, the highest numbers of respondents has responded chicken and fish bones. Next, the respondents who respond to fruits were the lowest. The difference between the highest and the lowest is 72.8%. Alright, next from the question number 5, the highest numbers of respondents has responded moderately. Next, the respondents who respond a lot more and little are the lowest. Difference between the highest and lowest is 79.68%. From the question sheet, the highest numbers of respondents has spent 10 ringgit per day. Next, the respondents who are spent 20 ringgit and above is the lowest. The difference between the highest and the lowest is 48.4%. From the last question, this highest respondent is respond YouTube. Next, the respondents who are respond Twitter were the lowest. The difference between highest and the lowest is 30.8%.
The graph shows the data about awareness. They have 5 questions in terms of awareness. This section makes the student know how aware the respondent about the environment at the cafeteria and bad effect of uncontrolled food waste. For question number 1, the difference between the highest and the lowest respondent was 59.6%. Next, for question number 2, the difference between the highest and the lowest respondent was 55.6%. Furthermore, by referring question number 3, the difference between the highest and the lowest is 40%. Besides that, the percentage of the difference between the highest and the lowest for question number 4 is 49.2%. Lastly, for question number 7, the difference between the highest and the lowest percentage of the question is 51.6%. This section is about knowledge terms and it contains 5 questions. This term makes the student know how much the respondent know about the food waste and the system of managing food waste. For question number 5, the difference between the highest and the lowest is 54.8%. Next, by referring to question number 6, the difference between the highest and the lowest is 42.4%. Furthermore, the difference between the highest and the lowest percentage at the question number 8 is 52%. Besides that, as we can see, the difference between the highest and the lowest percentage at question number 9 was 24.4%. Lastly, for question number 10, the percentage data for the difference between the highest and the lowest is 54.8%.
So, this is a graph for objective 3 to determine the knowledge of food as innovation product. So, this is for the knowledge for phase 1. So, the highest respondent select no was 130 respondent, and also the lowest respondent who respond certainly do not know was 4 respondent. So, for the next question, the highest respondent was 135 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond certainly do not know was 3 respondent. So, for the last question, for the knowledge phase for objective 2 determine the knowledge of food as innovation product shows the highest respondent select no was 130 51 respondents, and the lowest respondent who responded certainly do not know was 2 respondents. So for the next phase is product for objective 3. So the first question, the highest respondent select no was 128 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond certainly do not know was 4 respondent. So for the next question, the highest respondent select agree was 130 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond disagree was 2 respondent. So for question 9, the highest respondent select reasonable was 140 respondent, and the lowest who respond unfair was 2 respondent. So for the last question, for product, the highest respondent select reasonable was 124 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond unfair was 5 respondent. So for the last phase for objective 3 is information. So the highest respondent select agree was 142 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond disagree was 3 respondent. For the question 3, the highest respondent select agree was 135 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond less agree was 3 respondent. So for the last question for information, the highest respondent select no was 138 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond certainly do not know was 2 respondent.
Different highest and lowest.
So this is for graph in objective 4. This is to determine the system of food waste management at Cafeteria Polytechnic Sultan Elisha. So for the phase 1, for this graph is for knowledge. So the highest respondent select agree was 113 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond less agree was 1 respondent. So for the next question is question 7. The highest respondent select agree was 117 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond disagree was 1 respondent. So for the last question for this graph, the highest respondent select agree was 119 respondent, and the lowest respond select neutral was 32 respondent. So this is a graph for application. So the first, the highest respondent select strongly agree was 112 respondent, and the lowest who respond less agree was 6 respondent. So for the second question, based on the phase, the highest respondent select strongly agree was 117 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond neutral was 28 respondent. For the next question, show the highest respondent select agree was 124 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond disagree only 1 respondent. So for the last question for this phase is the highest respondent select agree was 138 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond disagree only 1 respondent. So for the last graph for objective 4 is information. So the highest respondent select agree was 128 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond disagree was 1 respondent. So for the second question, the highest respondent select agree was 120 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond disagree was 1 respondent. So for the last question is the choice show the highest respondent select student was 175 respondent, and the last option select food vendors was 166 respondent. So for the next phase is product for objective 3. So the first question, the highest respondent select no was 128 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond certainly do not know was 4 respondent. So for the next question, the highest respondent select agree was 130 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond disagree was 2 respondent. So for question 9, the highest respondent select reasonable was 140 respondent, and the lowest who respond unfair was 2 respondent. So for the last question for product, the highest respondent select reasonable was 124 respondent, and the lowest respondent who respond unfair was 5 respondent.
Different highest and lowest.
So for the conclusion, for the first objective, which is to determine level awareness of customer at cafeteria, the data shows the student found customer were less aware about food waste generation and adverse impact of uncontrolled food waste. The second objective, which is to identify whether customer know about the impact of uncontrolled waste. The student identified that students who are more knowledgeable about food waste are those CGPA 3.5 to 4.0. Most those who answer this questionnaire are students from environmental engineering. So for the third objective, which is design a system of food, students identified that most of the respondents from the questionnaire have suggest to the cafeteria management to build a proper and conducive food waste if possible. So for the fourth objective about innovation of food waste, students identify the most respondents know that food waste can be innovated and recycled.